Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 69 of Brainstoryum. I cannot believe it's December already, and this is the last show before the Christmas show, whatever that will be. I haven't really thought about that. I'll come up with something. But in the meantime, today's show is a real mix of writing experiences. Once again, words pulled at random from the socks of destiny will generate writing prompts like you've never heard before, like I've never heard before. And while, as usual, it's the third and last round, which leads to the longer, more complete story that I read out on the show, using the pause button to draft it, of course, this time the third story turns out to be the most difficult and the most revealing. I've been thinking lately about sharing more on process and writing techniques in this show, not quite going back to the earlier format where I talked at length at the beginning before going into the story brainstorms, but sort of sneaking in observations and helpful tips in between story brainstorms. And in a way, it's very handy that this time, on story number 3, I got stuck for a while. Because it's the tricky ones, the ones that make you work the hardest in a way, that can reveal the most about technique and process. There's nothing quite like getting stumped by a story to reveal your process and make you stop and think and consider what else to try, how to make this work. When a story just flows intuitively without much difficulty, that demonstrates that you've learned and absorbed certain techniques so well that they've become subconscious. But then that makes it much harder to describe what you've just done. But getting stuck, as I do today, for a little while, that pushed me to experiment and to share different methods that I was trying to unstick myself with, and which I know from experience work for me. So I hope that will be interesting and maybe even useful for your own writing. So, on with the show. But first, I have some listeners' ideas on a writing prompt from the previous show, the cryptic dryad or tree spirit. Nick Vrakar said, Gretel was lost, for that she was certain. Deep in the forest, deep in the woods. Are you lost? A voice called out. She stopped at the sound. Who is it? It is I. Where is it? All around you, nowhere at all. Stop it! The voice cackled. What fun would that be? The beginning of a maddening tale? It feels quite Alice in Wonderland to me. A woman lost in a place that is rapidly making less and less sense the more questions she asks and the further she explores. Riddles and playing with language and meaning. I like it. Thank you, Nick. Mariah said, there was a stone with runes on it. People told legends about it and believed it was a spell until a scientist managed to read it. It said, I was here, cryptic dryad. It's a mystery if he got it wrong, or if she was there and who she was, for that matter. Very cryptic. Actually, I do like that it's a scientist who manages to read this mythical rune spell. You've managed to wind in the theme that emerged of its own accord, it seemed, in the last show, where modern technology and ancient myths and powers came together, or clashed. Thank you, Mariah. Jay Nera said, Woodcutter girl wore a white tank top showing her muscles as she pushed a wheelbarrow full of log stumps back home. She'd chopped these logs from a dead tree. The dryad spied on her as a green beetle, camouflaged against the woman's pants without her noticing. Yet. The dryad plotted to take the logs and bring the tree back to life. She would outwit the human. This is a curious idea. It feels like the beginning of something kind of folksy and dark and very weird. Thank you for sharing your idea, Jay Nera. Well, this cryptic theme is making me think about how so many stories, and novels for that matter, begin with a mystery or something cryptic, not quite understood, as this is a great way to hook a reader. But it doesn't have to be a big mystery if you're not writing a mystery. Just a little unknown, a piece of information withheld is enough to make us go, ooh, what's going on there? Encouraging us to read on a bit further. Let me think of a simple example to illustrate this. If you began a story with something like, Bob sat indoors waiting for his food shopping delivery. I mean, that is a boring opening. Who wants to read about that? It doesn't matter if you know that the food shopping part is very quickly going to be dwarfed by the craziness of what's about to happen. The reader doesn't know that the delivery person is actually an alien or monster or something like that. But it's too late if this is the first line mentioning the boring bit about shopping. The promise of this story, delivered with this first line, is so dull they might not bother to move on to sentence number 2, let alone the next paragraph. So if you just remove the reference to the food shopping delivery and say, Bob sat indoors waiting, well, that's the sort of tiny mystery I'm talking about here. While the sentence isn't particularly dynamic or exciting, I'm sure you could come up with something much more curious given a little more time with a pen in your hand. But it does at least make you think, what is Bob waiting for? Because it could be anything. It's always worth keeping in mind the reader only knows what you tell them when you tell them. If you find that you have to resolve that small initial mystery rather quickly, say within the first paragraph or two, it makes sense to give away the reason, the rather boring reason for Bob's waiting, at least that's given you a bit more time or word space, I suppose, in the following paragraphs in which to drop a hint somewhere that something very strange is brewing. The bigger mystery. So still, before the delivery person arrives and is revealed to be an alien or a monster, in delivery company uniform, of course, you've hopefully used the next paragraphs to hook the reader even more with these hints. It may just be the style of writing that gives it away, or certain unusual observations which Bob makes while waiting, a bad feeling he has, a fleeting memory of a weird dream he had last night which he tries to brush off, or some other clue that something odd is about to happen that will keep your reader reading right up to the point when he opens the door and... I'm not writing this story, by the way. It's just an example that came to me while I was thinking through this idea about how to use a tiny mystery at the beginning of your story just to create a hook, being a little cryptic, like our cryptic dryad. Simply withholding a piece of information about what's going on, and it doesn't actually have to have anything to do with the main theme or event that you're excited to write about. Food shopping doesn't have anything to do with aliens. Well, I don't think it does. But with a fantasist's imagination, you can make that happen if you like. So, on that note, let's see what strangeness lies in store for us in the Socks of Destiny. That's right. And for those who haven't listened before or haven't played before, Exquisite Corpse generates a very weird sentence by mixing players' words and phrases into a sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. And so I shall reach into the describing word sock for our first word, which is from Alessandro Bozzo. Picturesque. Okay, so something attractive in a picture-like way. There is still a 9-year-old inside me that wants to say picture skew, but we'll move on from that. So, what is picturesque? Our first noun is from Starfields. Executioner. The picturesque executioner? Okay. Oh my goodness, I have no idea where this is going to go. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just going to reach for an action and see where this sentence takes us. But this is going to be bizarre. That's what you came for. So the action is from Paul Thomas. It's getting worse. Tried not to fall in love with. The picturesque executioner tried not to fall in love with someone or something. Okay, give it time, give it time. Let's try for another describing word. This is from Sean, also known as Blue Wizard Facts. Ragged. Oh dear. Final word, and then we face the music together. So the final word is from Wendy. I'm almost scared to look. Supply manager. Oh dear, I'm crying slightly here. So the whole Exquisite Corpse is, I'm going to need some green tea after this. The picturesque executioner tried not to fall in love with the ragged supply manager. Wow, that is obscenely weird. And now I need some green tea. Let's just give this a stir. Right. Okay, is that any better? I'm not sure. Oh, wow. Because supply managers are irresistible. It doesn't matter if they're ragged. But I don't know this. They could be. I'm not sure if I've met any supply managers. Notice I'm focusing on like the second half of the Exquisite Corpse because I can't face the first part yet. Supply manager makes me think of a supermarket, although, of course, they wouldn't have to be in a supermarket. It could be someone who's in control of office supplies for a large office. I mean, hey, I'm sure I've ordered staples and reams of printer paper at some point in my job. Tried not to fall in love with. Tried so hard. Well, we know this executioner is hot stuff. He's the most beautiful kind of hot stuff. He's picturesque. He's on a calendar. Executioner of the month for April. But in all seriousness, I'm struggling to connect with an executioner in this day and age, okay? I mean, I know it happens, but how unspeakable. And I know I can't write about that unless I turned it into some kind of bizarre, twisted cartoon. It could not be realistic. I can't go there. But wait, am I onto something? A cartoon or an illustration for a ghoulish historical comic? But he is picturesque, and that would be a more literal way of taking that word by turning him into a picture. So I'm not really cheating, am I, with the meaning? The supply manager, let's call her Michaela, slurps her coffee. Her hair has slipped out of her ponytail, and a halo of frizz encircles her tired face. She slams her empty mug on the table, then jerks at the sound, stealing worried glances around her for any colleagues she may have disturbed. But they all tap on, upright and perfect at their keyboards, ignoring her. It's like they have a tacit agreement to ignore her now. Maybe they do. She scowls, leaning on her arm to hit the downward arrow key several times. This is ridiculous, she whispers to herself for possibly the 5th time today. There's too much work to get through. And since she complained about it to her line manager, instead of taking her off some of these so-called projects, he switched her role to supply manager. It should be easy, but now, to spite her, all the workers, including the directors, have started placing orders for the weirdest and trickiest stuff. Ted in acquisitions wants a selection of mugs all printed with the names and photos of each member of his team. He even wants her to arrange the photographer to come in and take the pictures. Sal in marketing has managed to find the rarest size of staples to order. She'll have to hunt online for those. And Marcus in HR has an aquarium approved, complete with a list of all the types of tropical fish he requires. On the table, shoved under her handbag, is Michaela's favourite distraction. A comic book fan from way back in her teens, her latest craze is this semi-historical fantasy full of time travel and the clash of old and modern lifestyles. She slides out the comic again and stares longingly at the front cover. Against a backdrop of skyscrapers, striding out of a blue-green blast that could only be a time portal, is a gorgeous man, shirtless and rippling with muscle. From his right hand he drags an axe. This edition of the comic is simply called The Executioner. As Michaela gazes, her eyelids drooping with fatigue from the day, the cartoon man winks. Oh my word. Where to next? Oh, to be loved by a cartoon executioner. There's some kind of double or triple irony wrapped up in there. I'm not even sure how to begin unravelling it. Maybe this is the basis for a bizarre comedy with just a touch of surrealism. So let's say she falls asleep at her desk, her colleagues still concentrating hard on ignoring her, and she slips into dangerous dreams where all is made of liquid colour, and stepping through a time portal on cobbled streets in a faraway time and place, she dabbles with the affections of an executioner. It is a steady job, she tells herself. Back in the day. Let's move on to another Exquisite Corpse. Okay, so our first describing word is from Paul Thomas. Obscured. Interesting. Obscured from your mind or not easy to see. The next word is also from Paul Thomas, a regular contributor. Gorilla. An obscured gorilla. This is interesting. But it can't possibly be as crazy as the last one. I mean, that was ridiculous. Our action is from Edge O'Erin. Visited the pond to meet. Okay. Who does this obscured gorilla want to meet? Is it something to do with his obscurity? Next word is from Alessandro Bozzo. Enchanting. Enchanting. From picturesque to enchanting. Final word is from Wendy. Creative. Creative as a noun. Okay, so the entire Exquisite Corpse is the obscured gorilla visited the pond to meet the enchanting creative. Oh, well, we creatives are an enchanting lot. Although maybe, because there was attractiveness in the last Exquisite Corpse, I've jumped to the conclusion that enchanting here means attractive, when actually that's a pretty old-fashioned thing to say about someone you find beautiful. Oh, she was simply enchanting. When actually, what is far more intriguing when you're story hunting is the ability to enchant, a hint of magic. So why did the obscured gorilla visit the pond to meet the enchanting creative? Sounds almost like a very complicated version of why did the chicken cross the road? And we all know there are many, many answers to that deep question. I think because of the gorilla, I'm imagining a zoo. Animals have been disappearing, but the zoo staff, the security staff, are utterly baffled. There's no evidence of any break-ins to the enclosures. In fact, there's no sign of any disturbance at all. If a lock or a door had been forced, you would expect to find something. They even took fingerprints from the doors and door handles, and they all matched those of the staff, who had never been comfortable having their fingerprints on file, except now at least they saw the benefit. No sign whatsoever of any break-ins, although some signs here and there that there were some quiet, strangely calm and calculated breakouts. During the night, a shadow moved through the zoo, undetected by CCTV. A woman in a cloak. She strode from cage to cage, stopping to peer between the bars. Sometimes she seemed to be speaking very quietly. Other times she moved on, barely glancing at the cage, silent on soft shoes. She was enchanting some of the animals, giving them the gift of increased intelligence, but at the same time she was making them calm and invisible. Quietly, she whispered an instruction to each enchanted animal to meet her at the pond, which lay a short distance from the zoo gift shop and cafe restaurants, in 15 minutes. What is she doing? What is all this for? A witch with powers like this, and she chooses to go to a zoo to collect animals and give them language skills, maybe, increased intelligence and invisibility? Is this some kind of bizarre army? An army no one expects. Maybe she's an eco-activist who wants to spring an attack on a laboratory where some unfair testing on animals is taking place, and she wants it to be the most shocking, spectacular attack, with a gorilla ripping through the door, smashing its way through the corridors, and a little monkey with its intelligent little fingers to use the keys on the hooks by the front door and unlock the cages to let the animals out. She will film the whole thing. I'm guessing the invisibility part was a temporary spell in that case, or one which she lifts once they're clear of the zoo gates and are lumbering, scampering and flapping their way towards the target. In the aftermath, as the video is released online, none of her fingerprints will be found anywhere on site. No human fingerprints will be found either, besides the laboratory workers, because she got the animals to do it. And what an event to watch. Everyone thinks it's a trick put together by AI. They can't believe it until the same footage appears on the news and reporters visit and observe the exact same damage left behind by these rampaging animals. Animals saving animals. There's a certain intuitive logic to it, sort of poetic license, if you were. And maybe that is why the obscured gorilla visited the pond to meet the enchanting creative. Okay, well, that was strange. What next, I wonder? No pressure, but it's always the third that comes out a bit better. Okay, so the first word, if I can just get my hand out of this sock, is from Storky, which is actually spelled, I just want to mention it's spelled S-T-O-R-K-Y. Competitive. So is this just going to be a competitive personality, or is this going to involve a competition or something? Some jealousy maybe. Next word is from Mariah. Fire. Competitive fire. Oh, is that some kind of fire god or demon that's competitive? Next word, see what it's up to, is from Alessandro Bozzo. What? Drove over 500 kilometres with... Drove? A competitive fire at the wheel? We might have to be creative with that bit, but curious. Next word is from Paul Benfield. Wisp-like. But is fire kind of wisp-like, potentially? Final word is from Paul Thomas. Ship. A wisp-like ship. Okay, so the entire Exquisite Corpse is the competitive fire drove over 500 kilometres with the wisp-like ship. Oh, gosh, there's so much going on. Is that a ghost ship at the end? My first image is of a ship on fire, travelling a very long distance nonetheless. If there are ghosts on board, well, they're not so bothered by the fire because they're already dead. But can a ghost ship burn? Unless the ship itself is real, but then it wouldn't last very long, certainly not as far as 500 kilometres, it would sink. So I think that ghosts on a ghost ship have piled up real wood on deck, which they keep burning to remind them what it was like to be warm, alive. But where's the competitiveness in that? The competitive fire drove, or I guess sailed, over 500 kilometres with the wisp-like ship. I'm cheating slightly with drove, unless this fire drove them forwards, made the ship do this long journey. That's a way of driving, because there has to be a reason why. Something urgent, some desperate need has forced these ghosts to take this journey, or else they've been coerced into doing it or paid by someone. And it's something to do with this fire. That's got to be the key. But I look at this exquisite corpse and I'm not sure what to do. Nothing is really tickling my neurons. In a way, I have to think outside of it and work out what else there might be outside of the exquisite corpse to bring into it, and which I know from experience tends to inspire me. This is also a really good method of brainstorming a story, any story. It doesn't have to be using exquisite corpse. Just start making a list of the things or the themes that you know generally spark your imagination. But for me, for the sake of this exercise I'm trying, interpreting an exquisite corpse, I will try to come up with things that inspire me, but are also potentially connected with the words I've already been given. So, the sea. I love sea themes in stories, and we have a wispy ship. Mythological creatures living in or around water. And fire is kind of a contrast to water. Although fire might imply a dragon, there's a story in Fraser Armitage's new book, A Stitch Between Worlds, called Dragon Piercer, and it's kind of put me in the mood for dragons. So maybe, but still this isn't quite doing the trick to come up with an idea for this exquisite corpse. So now I'm going to chase down the feelings I have around these ideas, the sensations these themes invoke in my imagination, without, of course, necessarily demanding to know what is happening in the story. This is another method you can try when you're stuck. Just describe images or sensations around what you're writing, even smells that you associate with what you're writing, even without asking why. Never ask why, just go for it. Because if you keep going and you keep doing this, the idea will hopefully reveal itself to you. Your subconscious mind will do the work for you. The sensations and images are the doorway, if you like. A brainstorm that would seem to be going nowhere at first, and I will be using the pause button a lot in this, and I'll explain more about what I've done afterwards as well. So let me see. A rush, a crackling of fire, an untouchable heat that makes you turn your face away, versus the sea, bigger than the imagination, swelling, roving, as far as the eye can see, salt-flavoured splashes. Flames dance like the sun on the water. Fire roars like the ancient rage of a dragon awoken from its cave. From afar, a ship seems a weightless thing, dipping and rising on the whims of that wild beast, the sea. A pirate's flag ripples from the mast, the eyes of the skull enlarged and marked sharply in the shape of diamonds. The dragon narrows its eyes from the cave entrance. The pirates have come to steal. With a bellow that shakes the tiny seaside town below, the dragon leaps from the cove and spreads his wings, catching the sea breeze on their wide swoop. He cackles and drinks in the salty sky, great gulps of it. Inside his belly stirs the flickering rage that will obliterate this ship long before it comes to shore. What fools are these? Why do they make it so easy? Tiny clicks on the cliff now behind him, hundreds of doors snapping shut, windows closing or opening. The dragon grins but doesn't bother to turn, his amber eyes trained on his floating quarry. The people of this town live like trembling ants crawling over the edge of the land. They are a strange, superstitious folk, dream catchers swinging from their doors, as if a dream could save them from a dragon's fire. But they have nothing to be afraid of today. The pact remains unbroken with the townsfolk, more or less. They leave out cakes and meat for him every full moon, and in return he leaves them be, except every now and then, when he fancies a little extra meat, which he'll enjoy from another source today. Although this seafaring snack does seem rather meagre. The ship, less than a mile away now, bounces on a wave, so spindly. What tiny beings are these? It hardly seems worth breathing on. But the smell of thievery is there. It whips across the water, stirring the bloodlust in his veins. It is the only thing that awakens this dragon, besides the smell of fresh cakes on a full moon. He drinks in another lungful of the blue sky and blasts the vessel with hell fire. Circling, thinking only of whether to break off the mast first so it doesn't get stuck between his teeth, the dragon swoops back in surprise. The ship is unharmed. How did that happen? Oh well, he must have missed. He roars again, letting the fire rip from his mouth, closer this time. He snuffs in shock, flapping back again. The ship is untouched. Such a wispy thing, too. And no shouts come from the deck, only a few specks moving around, morsels only. Hopefully there are more pirates hiding below deck, otherwise it's a shame really that he had to fly this far for so tiny a meal. Maybe there's an enchantment that lies upon this ship, but not for much longer. For even the most powerful of fairies knows that there is nothing that can withstand 3 blasts of a dragon's wrath. He gathers his breath once again, lets the final ball of fire roll inside his belly, despite the coldness of the air. Clouds clump around him, blurring the distinction between sea and sky. He scoops a cloud aside to find the ship again, which flies faster, skimming over waves. But are they waves? The ocean no longer seems to dunk and swell. It's these grey-white clouds fogging up everything. Mile after mile he chases it, roaring at its tail. Such a tiny thing, wrapped in clouds, weaving through fog. Something isn't right. The ship and clouds slow down. The dragon inhales, feeling only dankness inside his lungs. Tittering laughter escapes from the ship below. It's an illusion. Some kind of pirate fairy trickery. The dragon pulls back and gasps at the sight of his own front claws, dissolving into fluffy white. He too is built from clouds. What's happening? Is it an illusion or a dream? He wakes up, Curling his sharp claws over the stone floor of his cave, relief floods through him. What a dream! But as he sits up and stretches, he lets out a whimper. An area that last night glittered with his best pile of jewels is empty. Surely he's made a mistake. He turns around, frantically searching. His other gems are all there, but not his best diamonds, his favourite blood-red rubies. On shaky legs, he staggers to the front of the cave to gulp some fresh air and finds a note held down by a simple pebble. "We've taken a handful of jewels," it says. "We could have taken the lot. This is your first warning. Treat the townsfolk well, or we will be back. Signed, the Dream Pirates." So, I got there in the end. And that is how, for now, the competitive fire drove over 500 kilometres with the wisp-like ship. It took a while, but I hope you enjoyed that. And also what I ended up sharing about my process of getting there, to hopefully prove that even if you're really stuck, you can get yourself out of a rut if you just draw upon the story elements that excite you and explore them without questioning and without worrying what's coming next. Just write for about 20 minutes if you can. And of course, what emerged for me in the end was another story element that I love, which is dreams, powerful dreams that change things. And that gave me my twist in the end. I'll confess that during the writing of this, while the dragon was still chasing the ship, I had no idea what was coming. I got up for a break, made myself a cup of tea, and before going back to the keyboard, I gazed out of the window for a couple of minutes, as you do, and that's when I saw a lovely fat cloud, and something in my head went ping, and so I added my dreampunk element, which turns the whole idea into something more than what it started out as. So, as the dream idea occurred to me while I was drafting this, it was with the power of the pause button that I realised it would work better if I nipped back to the beginning section and I threw in a mention of this belief that the local townsfolk have about dreams being powerful, to try and foreshadow this so that it doesn't come completely out of the blue. So yes, I actually went back to the beginning of the draft before I'd completely finished it. No harm in jumping around sometimes if something really grabs you. In fact, if I had more time, well, I can always come back to this story to improve it, and probably will. I would maybe add a little more about this part to help foreshadow the idea, to wind in this notion of dreams being powerful quite subtly, but so that it's more memorable. And it does mean that it doesn't come absolutely out of nowhere when this finally happens to the dragon. There's a part of you that was maybe expecting it. So there it is. Begin with writing about sensations and feelings that are set off by ideas that excite you. Simply observe them, because observing can actually be an intense interaction if you think about it. When you're reading, for example, technically you're observing words that someone else has set down on the page, but it's more than that. Your mind is interacting with what you're being given. But for the best experience of either reading or writing a new story idea through this discovery method, there must be always a sense of letting go, submitting a little to what's coming, the power of what's coming, allowing the wonder to do its work. More than just watching it happen, it's an experience and you're part of it. You have to be, to engage your subconscious mind and stir the deep waters from which an idea will emerge. And on that note, I think it's time to suggest a word combination for you to consider, if you will, for next time. For what have we had? A picturesque executioner, a dangerous and bizarrely alluring character in a comic, escapism for a dejected office worker, or something far more dangerous than escapism, an enchanter awaking animals in a zoo to rescue other animals in a laboratory, or a dragon who is tricked by dream pirates. I love the idea of dream pirates. But of the word combinations themselves in the Exquisite Corpses, I quite like the enchanting creative. There's also the wisp-like ship. That's more of a solid idea, a concrete image to play with. So maybe I'll suggest that. Or perhaps I'll leave it up to you. You know how to get in touch with me. Just go to annatizard.com and click the contact button on a footer on any page. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstoryum. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.